Hey Brain Trust, welcome back to the channel. I just spent the last 14 days building a game for a game development tournament called GDKO. This is my game Laser Beast, and I approach building it a little differently from any project I've tackled before. So let's dive in. Let's take a look at the game itself, break down my approach, and we'll talk about some of the highs and lows from this last 2 weeks. This is Laser Beast, a puzzle platformer where you navigate through deadly laser mazes using tight controls and quick thinking. Press the buttons to deactivate the lasers and progress through all the tricky levels. There's currently 12 levels in total, with plans to add a whole lot more if I get further in this tournament. So I mentioned I approached how I built this game very differently from any other, so let's talk about that for a minute. So if you've been around the channel and you've seen my other devlogs, you know I really like to focus on the brainstorming process, trying to come up with as many ideas as I can for the given theme, and then refining them based on the judging criteria and what I realistically feel like I can make in 2 weeks. And I definitely did that, but I also gave myself 2 additional criteria that I haven't ever done in the past. Hi, kitty cat. You gonna come say hi? In my last video, I talked a lot about what my long-term goals as a game developer are, so this game had to align with what that long-term vision was, primarily being either a 2D platformer, a Metroidvania, or a 3D collectathon. And the other criteria is that it had to be a game that I could easily expand into future rounds of GDKO. In the past, I've always done games, a new game each round, and I didn't want to do that this year. I wanted to focus on something that I could build into a fully featured game. The theme we were given was to create a core mechanic and a secondary mechanic that could be used for progression. So with that theme in mind, I decided to go on a precision platformer with the core mechanic of very tight run and jump movement and a secondary mechanic of button-activated lasers. I started out by making a simple prototype just to test the core idea and ensure that the mechanics felt solid and engaging. Almost immediately, I felt like I was onto something, so I decided to commit to it. Day 1 was focused entirely on getting the initial project set up. I imported my custom tile map tool, which I'll be sharing more about in a future video, and added in some very basic particle effects just to get the look and feel that I was going for as quickly as possible. With the rest of the day, I was entirely focused on the core mechanic, getting the player movement controller feeling as good as possible. Then I added in the secondary mechanic, buttons that would deactivate lasers of a specific color. I also added in the player collisions with the lasers and the death and respawn system. At this point, it felt like all the pieces were in place and that this could end up being a full, completed game. I added in a checkpoint system, which ultimately I didn't use, but we're going to come back to that in a minute. Next up, I wanted to make the full game loop, so I made the title scene, the options credits, level select, and just 2 basic levels just to make sure that the level select logic actually worked properly. The next 3 days were focused entirely on level design, and my goal here was to create levels that felt like they progressed naturally. The earlier levels focused entirely on platforming, and then you introduced 1 new mechanic at a time. First, a single static laser, then a button to turn off that static laser, then these sliding lasers and the buttons to turn them off, and near the end of the game, we combined everything into harder levels. At the end of day 10, I felt like the game was really solid. I still had a couple more ideas, but I decided not to add any new features and instead shift my focus to entirely on polishing what I had. I fixed any remaining bugs, added in some screen shake, post-processing, anything I could think of to really make it stand out. And I think the final result is pretty good. The final result is something I feel aligns with my long-term goal, and it stands strong as a standalone entry. So let's talk about what went right and what went wrong throughout this process. Let's start with the very beginning. By focusing on the core mechanics of a player movement controller and the button that deactivated the lasers, I felt like I had a really strong foundation for the game almost from day 1, and I think that was a very big part of why this feels so cohesive. And the piece that I probably kicked myself for the most is the checkpoint system. I clearly implemented it in there, it was working, and when I got to the level design, I just decided not to use it, thinking it would be a little bit more challenging for the player. And watching people play through my game, I feel like that was the wrong decision to make. And I am going to have the checkpoint system in the next one, so you guys better vote me into the next round. And that's my entry into round 1 of GDKO 2025. I am actually really happy at how this game turned out. I felt like it was one of the strongest games that I've made so far, and I feel like it really sets me up for future rounds as well. If you enjoyed this devlog and you want to see how things turn out in GDKO, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything. And throughout this video, I did mention how this game aligns with my long-term goals as a game developer. If you want to hear more about that, I am going to have it right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.